There were attempts on the part of the administration to stop this investigation from happening. They did not want this investigation to happen.
An investigation must not interfere with the ongoing efforts to prevent the next attack.
Frustrated with the attitude of the White House and seeming lack of interest from the public, the family members began actively seeking support from the news media. And given the persistence of the media's focus on pain and suffering, it was not difficult for the Jersey widows to get their attention.
You know, it was my private pain and my private story, and I really did not want to share that. But we made a conscious decision that we would start to say to them, okay, well, I will tell you about me personally if you talk about the fact that there's not an investigation.
I'm joined right now by 4 women who lost their husbands in the attacks.
Kristen Breitweiser is one of 4 New Jersey widows who lost.
These women banded together after their husbands were killed, and now they're leading a campaign to find out exactly how did 9/11 happen.
And finally, the media began to report on our activities, not just the activities of the administration.
Look forward to the president and the vice president going to both come in there.
To go on any show is not easy, but you needed the public pressure in order to make anything happen in Washington. I mean, they need huge public pressure to move them.
President Bush signed legislation today creating an independent commission to investigate the September 11th attack on America. President Bush had at first opposed any independent commission, but he reversed himself under pressure from the families of 9/11 victims.
The largest structural collapse in world history, the largest loss of life on American soil since the Civil War, and not one governmental or elected official wanted to know why and how this happened. 9/11 was the biggest don't ask, don't tell, and if it wasn't for the families, we wouldn't have anything, and that's very frightening.
On the 7th of July 2005, 52 innocent people died and hundreds more were left injured. 3.5 years have passed since the attacks, but survivors and families of those who died are still demanding several questions be answered. Some 7/7 victims are still pressing for an independent inquiry into the attacks.
An independent inquiry is vital for you?
Well, it's very important for me and the other members of the families. It's also important that we find out why the government told such untruths.
Graham, thank you very much.
People whose lives were changed forever by the terrorists, the bereaved and the survivors will go to the Home Office today with a letter calling for an official inquiry into 7/7. The Home Secretary, John Reid, has ruled it out.
This is not about blame for me. This is about trying to save lives. And I would like an independent inquiry, an inquiry that's independent of government and the security services as to what really happened.
So 3 years after suicide bombers struck London, the victims and their families still await justice.
But in the meantime, let's hear from that press conference involving solicitors and relatives of those who were killed in the July the 7th bombings.
7th July 2005. To my left is Rose Morley, whose husband Colin died at Edgware Road. And to her left is Ernest Adams, whose son James died at the King's Cross bomb. To my right to my immediate right is Jackie Putnam, who survived the blast at Edgware Road. Liz Kenworthy, who also survived and indeed was recognised for her bravery in helping others. Janine Mitchell, whose husband Paul survived, and Tim Coulson, who survived as well. The people around me and many others have been campaigning for many years for an investigation into the circumstances surrounding 7/7. The survivors were forced into a campaign for an inquiry simply because successive Home Secretaries refused it. An awful lot of pain and grief could have been avoided if 3 years ago, when we first asked for it, the government had decided to hold a public inquiry.
welcome Mayor Michael Bloomberg of the City of New York.
From the outset, many families were concerned by how the investigation was being conducted.
We begged and pleaded that people should be put under oath. At the beginning, they were not.
Will describe our city government.
As the hearings progressed, the families were becoming more and more frustrated by what they perceived as softball questioning from the commissioners.
I've appreciated already his remarks.
We have certain questions that we, the families, wrote for each of the people that were coming to testify today. And the questions weren't asked.
Complete waste of time. It was a bunch of people throwing accolades at each other and asking the same questions one after the other.
Skirting around issues, not being defined enough in their questions.
It's a stonewall, it's a cover-up. As far as I'm concerned, I'm very bitter, I'm very angry.
Still, no one was prepared for what they then uncovered about Philip Zelikow, the executive director of the 9/11 Commission.
He who had the power to say where the investigation was going, who would be interviewed, what would go into the 9/11 Commission report, what wouldn't.
We have found out that he not only served on the transition team of the Bush administration, that he was a person who wrote a draft memo for the setup of the Bush administration's National Security Council, that he was an individual who wrote the preemptive war strategy that was eventually used for the war in Iraq, that he is a close friend of Condoleezza Rice's. We want him to resign.
Philip Zelikow refused to resign, and Chairman Keene dismissed the family's concerns over conflicts of interest.
But there is now a relief that the inquest will be held. They wanted to play a more active part in it, but they have been told that they cannot do so. And you may remember at the conclusion of the preliminary hearings, Rachel North, who had been one of the many campaigners for an inquiry, asked for a statement to be read out, and I will read to you, if I may, one paragraph from it, because this sums up, I think, the views of each and every one of the survivors. She said this: "It appears to me that if you are a member of the public who is unfortunate enough to survive a terrorist atrocity, then no matter how much your pain, your physical and or mental injuries cause you, no matter how much your life is blighted, no matter how much your health, career, personal life, relationships, family, sense of self is affected, no matter whether you become suicidal, no matter how much your life is changed, reduced and damaged, you will have no right to ask questions about what happened to you and to expect answers to be given to you. You may be called as a witness for the benefit of others, but that is all. You may not see documents or ask questions. You may not expect a public inquiry. You should just be quiet and be grateful that you are alive."
We have questions that need answering. We were allowed to submit some questions to the Intelligence and Security Committee, but those questions were not answered. Our role now will be one of answering questions only. Our questions are not going to be answered. Again, we've been shunted aside by officialdom.